gonna tell about? Who's gonna tell about what's going on down there? You try to register like the Constitution says. They take away your job and they take away your bread.
I'm looking at middle-class, largely white suburban kids in the new suburbia.
You might as well be dead, oh.
What I'm looking at in this clip is what it was like that caused kids to rebel.
Nobody knows about what's going on down there.
Nobody believed these films. These films were like fantasies. They were Hollywood fantasies. Looked at from the present, well, I don't know what you think, but looked at from the late 1980s, we could all look at these old films and say, yeah, that's what I was rebelling against. It wasn't like that. None of us lived like that.
Who's gonna tell about? Who's gonna tell about?
One group didn't participate in the 60s at all, lived in small towns, rural America, or just wasn't part of it, didn't look at it that way.
What's going on down there?
Man, I was tame compared to what they do now. Are you kidding? I didn't do anything. We just jiggle, you know.
Another group rebelled, grew their hair longer, smoked marijuana, wear a hippie-like outfit, although no way were they hippies, listen to rock and roll.
It's according to what you're talking about. I don't know.
They throw you into jail, all covered with blood.
And a third group, a very small group, were political activists.
The higher up man won't do you any good.
Really radical. But that may be less than 5% of the population. So it divides into these three groups. About 35% of the baby boom generation say they participated in the 60s. The group that was political radicals, less than 5%. The others, maybe 65%, who didn't really participate in the 60s. Some of them did in the 70s, and some of them did in the 80s. But in the 60s, we're looking at this large segment of largely suburban, largely white kids.
He also wears the hood, oh. Nobody knows about what's going on down there.
And the idea of normal is a kind of vegetative state where nothing happens. But that's what everybody tried to aspire to. But I think it's a word that people are constantly using to exhort you to behave better. Why don't you be normal? It's not normal to wear your hair long. It's not normal to wear Levi's. It's not normal to listen to rock and roll. It's not normal to read comic books. There's a whole list of a million things that everybody does that isn't normal.
Who's gonna tell about? Who's gonna tell about what's going on down there?
And then one day, the principal came into the class and had us all pass up our copies of Catcher in the Rye and told us to forget that we'd ever seen this book. We learned fairly quickly that the book had been banned by the school board. This turned out to be a real learning experience for all of us, because we learned a lot more than we would have learned if we'd just been allowed to read the book. Because this way, of course, not only did we read the book, but everybody in the school suddenly wanted to read the book.
Stand up like a man and they cut you in two. The killer goes to trial, but what good does it do? He's on the jury too. Nobody knows about what's going on down there.
I mean, you're just born into it, and that it's something that you have. It's something that you know involuntarily. You know, like you have two arms. You're just anonymous in the world. You walk. I always say it's like you're private and public wherever you go. You walk the streets, you do whatever, and you can actually have private thoughts and private experiences while you're amongst other people. And people who have never had that change in their life don't think about it, don't even question it, just is. It's not a part of their cognitive, it's just that. But when that changes, it's a change, and it's a huge one. And I think just as a person or a human, where it's like out of survival, you're fighting against that. And it might be the artistic side of you that's fighting against that wants that privacy, so you can still exist in the world and feel safe to, express what you want to express. But ultimately, and that's why it's hard to put in words, but I do know it has something to do with like survival. It has something to do with, it's my name. I'd like to how can I keep my name mine? How would I like keep who I am, whatever that is, mine, but it is a survival. It's fighting against the idea that your privacy or who you are is not your own anymore in some way. And I understand that, wanting to fight against that. And I think, obviously, I don't do it to the extreme he does, obviously, but I understand.
What's going on down there? The newspaper pages have nothing to say. They either tell lies or they hide it all away. Day after day after day, oh, nobody knows about what's going on down there. Who's gonna tell about what's going on down there? We sing you this song so you know what's true, and you've gotta take it with you everywhere you go, because it's up to you. Oh, nobody knows about what's going on down there. Who's gonna tell about what's going on down there? What's going on down there?
It's very hard to comprehend it, because in 15 years it's hard to comprehend that happening, to all the countries all over the world via satellite. It's very difficult to comprehend.
I'm David Hoffman, filmmaker, and you're about to see a clip from my 6-part PBS television series, Making Sense of the 60s, circa 1991.
Their purpose was to teach kids the proper way to behave and to repeat and reinforce a set of rules.
I must say this about when we first approached the various countries around the world, Elvis is certainly the only performer that could do this today. He is well known in every country that we have taught, in fact in every country in the world, and the acceptance was just fantastic. It wasn't a case of any selling, because he's been in demand for live performances around the world, but you just can't do this, so this is the way of approaching it. But the acceptance exceeded all of our expectations, Elvis.
Thank you very much. That's very nice.
And I have a recording company called Cassandra Records. I issue not only music, but some prose and poetry of my own. I was under contract to Columbia, and one album was issued, and I got very little publicity backing or help from Columbia. But I finally decided to issue an album in spite of my contract with Columbia. I thought, wouldn't it be beautiful to have the General Motors of the music industry come down on little Malvina Reynolds because she was issuing an album of her own songs that they were not issuing. So I issued my own. Distribution is limited, but at least we have control of it. She in chairs along on the rim of the world, always about to go over.
Line 2, please.
What was that I did wrong? I was holding out a long time before you got into it. I wasn't sure what you were doing.
Well, just come in wherever you
It's so difficult for me to go through that process of producing an album. Retakes and retakes that a young person can live through for 4, 5, 6 hours a day, but I would get tired.
This is Rim of the World on 2.
She inches along on the rim of the world.
Guys.
This is Rim of the World on 3.
She inches along on the rim of the world.
I'm squeaking.
Yeah, dude. This is Rim of the World. Take 4.
Although I can be awfully sorry for myself. I have a certain pride in having made it alone. I represent an oppressed minority, you know, women of my age trying to make it in popular music. So I'm fighting my fight.
How she can manage, I never will know, to get from one day to the other, scrounging a buck or a bed, or the share of a roof for her head. This nobody's child, this precarious girl who lives on the rim of the world. Wait till you're 76, kids.
I'm in love with my audience the way other people are in love with somebody else. There's an instant love affair with them, right there, where you're having such a good time together. They like my songs, I like them, and I can't do without it. If I go for a couple of weeks without a show, I feel deprived.
From Reuters, 3 cheers for the little mouse that fucked up the clearinghouse and set the stock exchange in a spin and made the bankers cry. So much for the electronic brains that run the world of banks and aeroplanes. And if one little mouse can, why not you and
I sing songs that I know many in my audience will disagree with, because I'm not just amusing them, but provoking them to think.
1,000 new friends right away. Oh.
I think this country is scandalous in its treatment of the aged. Their wisdom, their experience, the traditions they carry are discarded along with so many other good things that we throw away in this wasteful society.
Big house.